Hello and welcome to a rather larger than usual episode 56, where we will look at and review the tabletop game and watch called Popeye, and we'll be exploring some of the less known history that surrounds the use of this character, and its groundbreaking provenance with Nintendo. First offered for sale August 17, 1983, the mini arcade sold an estimated 250,000 units worldwide. It came with the larger style instruction booklet that accompanied all the tabletop range of game and watches. Given the production code of PG-74. After the table of contents, there's a black and white picture of today's unit with all the major parts, operations and controls clearly labeled. This is followed by the detailed process of setting both time and alarm functions. A basic how to play section completes the introduction part of the booklet. A 12-part illustrated user flow diagram is nicely spread out over the following 3 pages, and within that infographic, the game's details and various nuances from the actual gameplay of this mini arcade are explored and explained to the potential player. In the classic genre of all the much later beat-em-ups, today's game, while perhaps seen as old-fashioned, offers several attack combos, and even has a bonus or boost assist delivered from a can of spinach to execute that special and unstoppable killer attack. The booklet finishes up with the traditional caution statements and specifications for the correct maintenance and care of the console. The super cute collection of these Nintendo tabletop series of game and watches only spawned 4 of these brightly colored mini arcade systems. So, let's look at some representative gameplay from today's star and focus of the show, the fighting game called Popeye, that awesome little green machine. Here we see that game mode A is playing. Brutus and Popeye are duking it out, with a plethora of continuous blows, seen here on the lower platform, while Olive Oyl is sitting tied up, and calling for help on the upper level. We saw that Popeye has already knocked Brutus in the water, and a can, or tin of spinach has appeared, just ahead of Olive's feet. The can, or tin of spinach will move closer and closer to Olive every time Brutus is knocked into the water by the hero Popeye. When Olive is able to reach the spinach, she will drop it down to Popeye, who is hopefully in the right place to receive it. But hopefully you also saw that Brutus has actually beaten Popeye, and dropped him unceremoniously in the water, resulting in a single lost life, which is shown by a small bust icon, head and shoulders, of Popeye, in the upper right of the screen. So with the score standing at 1 apiece, the fight looks evenly matched. Will Popeye fall and score another miss, or will Brutus do the falling, allowing the spinach to get one step closer to our damsel in distress, Olive? Well, I hope you caught that. Brutus fell, and the spinach moved a little bit closer to Olive Oyl. I'm finding it way too difficult to call it either way in this fight. The fight seems to be going in Popeye's favor, as he once again sends Brutus into the drink. That spinach is now at Olive's feet, and ready to use, but Popeye has also conceded another miss. Everybody and their dog knows what a Hadoken is, and, to a lesser degree, the Shoryuken. However, most names of these special moves, or supers in fighting games go widely unrecognized by the casual audiences, and yet there's so much creativity put into it. Just look at Popeye's moves here. After delivering that special move, Popeye has around 661 points, but has 2 of his 3 lives lost. And as the fight continues, it looks like Popeye has the upper hand here, after dunking Brutus once again. As this is effectively a sudden death playoff, it's good to see that Popeye has kept up the assault on his nemesis Brutus. He seems to have the edge on Brutus, with several well-delivered combo punches, and he's got him. Brutus is once again in the water, and the spinach is another step closer to Olive. Oh, but it's over. Brutus has delivered the coup de grace. Popeye is finished. Shown with 3 icons in the top right of the screen, it's game over. And for completeness, if we'd been playing game mode B, it would have included a pesky swordfish that continuously prods his pointy little nose through the broad walk boards, and pushes poor old Popeye backwards, acting as an assist to Brutus. Today's star and focus of our show, Popeye the Sailor Man, was a very famous and loved character for many decades. However, it might surprise you when I tell you that he would go on to be the unlikely influence behind the phenomenon that we know today as Donkey Kong, appearing in the arcade game, which, I'm equally sure you know, introduced us to the iconic megastar called Mario, and propelled the game's title, Super Mario Bros., along with Nintendo to worldwide success. Isn't it amazing how one incident, potentially can completely change the trajectory for a company and an industry? Consider for a moment if Popeye had never been created, we would not have had Mario, and the original NES might not have had the success it received. I'm sure you'd agree with me that Super Mario Bros. Is Nintendo's #1 selling game franchise of all time. It's also credited with propelling the NES into a new, and somewhat golden era of video games, and this after the great video game crash of 1983 in which today's game was launched. If you're confused or doubtful, which I fully understand, then let's break it down and look at how all of this came together and how Popeye really did lead to the birth of Super Mario. To achieve this, I guess I'll start at the beginning, so stick with me for a short while. To explain this properly means going back to the original story of both of the companies and their characters. Nintendo's first arcade game would be called Sheriff, and it came out in 1979. The game was also known as Bandito, and it was a Western style of game. It involved controlling a county sheriff who would have to protect the town against bandits. There is also a captured woman, so he has to protect the town and also rescue the girl. You can see where this is going, I hope? The arcade game called Radar Scope, from 1980, was a kind of Space Invaders style of game that actually involved a new type of hardware and innovations that had some good possibilities for other games in the future. Radar Scope did okay in Japan, but when Nintendo excitedly launched it in the United States, it didn't go over too well, and flopped. This left Nintendo with several warehouses filled with thousands of these unbought cabinets with no game or market. The head of Nintendo of America was a gentleman called Minoru Arakawa, and he was the son-in-law of the Nintendo CEO Hiroshi Yamauchi. Recognizing the scale of the problem, he begged his father-in-law to provide him with a new game that could be swapped over into all those unused Radar Scope cabinets. This would be Nintendo's last shot at making it in America, as they were facing financial disaster. Yamauchi understood the dire situation and asked every Nintendo employee for ideas that could be turned into a video game. Shigeru Miyamoto spoke up with an idea. Arguably, Miyamoto was more aware of American culture, and had noticed how popular Popeye the Sailor Man was during this period. His idea was to create a video game based on the three main characters, and thought a simple love triangle between Popeye, Bluto, and Olive Oyl would work best. Thinking back to the game Sheriff, he knew there would be a woman that would have to be rescued, and that was the basic premise for the game, which was their biggest success to date. People would recognize Popeye, and the other characters, and would already know the whole backstory, and the love triangle aspect would work easily into the game they were planning. All in all, it would likely be a quick introduction that the gaming world would accept. But they hit a big problem: they couldn't get the rights to Popeye, which clearly needed a license to produce. Or were they really dead in the water? Could they still produce it with new characters? The concept was still a good idea, but now Miyamoto would need to swap out the characters and come up with his own. He needed to use the brutish Bluto as the main villain, and he took inspiration from both Beauty and the Beast, but then embraced King Kong as the perfect beast/villain, which, as an aside, would lead to yet another litigation and subsequent court case, this time over King Kong's copyright. Anyhow, I need to get back on track, and that's yet another story, for another time. He thought that Bluto could be easily swapped out for a giant ape-type creature. Olive Oyl would be the classic damsel in distress, the woman needing to be rescued, but they would initially call her simply Lady and then later Pauline. This all came up when they were talking to the Nintendo warehouse landlord Mario Segale. He had mentioned that the warehouse manager's wife was named Polly, or Pauline, and that might be a good name. And instead of the hero figure being Popeye, he would use a carpenter that would be given a very generic name of Jumpman, before becoming the iconic character Mario. With the backstory in place, he had to design the actual game. But his original ideas, including multiple sizes and levels and catapulting characters across the screen, were way too complex to program. He then thought of using a sloped or inclined series of platforms with barrels that would have to be jumped over. But instead of just one screen like Pac-Man, there would be some variations between screens as the levels progressed. A 4-person team programmed the game, and they would call it Monkey Kong, but due to an advertising error the publicly surrounding it was misspelt Donkey Kong, and so they went with that title. This was the first time that a story had been developed long before the programming of a video game. Usually the game was programmed and then they would throw together some sort of theme or story. With bated breath they sent it to Nintendo of America for testing. And the sales managers and beta trials hated it. The American team were more focused on games that were based on mazes or shooting, and this was completely different. But Nintendo were out of options. They had to get something out there, and they had to make use of all the radar scope units that were just sitting there burning a hole in their pockets. Relabeled Donkey Kong, these games were shipped out, and you know what happened next. Circling back to today's focus, Popeye the Game & Watch, from the tabletop version, only spawned one new re-release, and that came in the identical game-playing system, from the Game & Watch Panorama Screen series, using a similar technology to today's mini arcade, to achieve full color, but this time in a compact and foldable case. And, I guess, All that's really left to say is, please consider subscribing, that would be absolutely awesome. Or perhaps simply give our channel a supportive thumbs up, better still just hit that alarm button. And as always, feel free to either share or add a constructive comment in the section below. But lastly, a big and sincere thank you to everyone for joining us here today.